Rain hadn't come to Haven Ridge in 500 days, but tonight the whole town swore they could smell it metallic, sharp, like a secret finally breaking loose. On the narrow catwalk of Dry Mesa Dam, Ava Martinez gripped the frozen wheel that might save them all, her boots rattling against steel that moaned like an old hinge. Behind her, 100 eyes burned up through the dust, waiting, judging, praying. And then the safety line at her waist jerked, strands snapping one by one as if someone had meant for her to fall. Ava dropped flat, ribs slamming the grate, fingers hooked through iron that wanted to shake her loose. Below, a voice ripped out of the crowd. Ava! She knew that voice, Terry. It had been months since he called her name with anything but distance, yet here it was, raw and panicked, climbing the wind to reach her. Not tonight, she told herself. Not when they all want to see me break. She crawled on an elbow toward the wheel, breath tight and disciplined. The way you breathe when there's no space for fear. The catwalk shivered. The harness carabiner clinked against the rail with a sound that didn't belong to weather at all, a thin metallic tattle telling her what she already suspected. The line hadn't failed. It had been helped along. Ava planted her boots, reset her grip, and levered her weight. The wheel moved a grudging quarter-inch, then seized as if insulted. Wind combed the ridge and carried up the smell from the dry lakebed's sun-baked silt, old oil, a ghost of minnows. She could feel the town below gathering itself into one body. The councilman chewing a thumbnail bloody, the diner ladies in denim jackets clutching paper cups, the high school kids recording grainy video with shoulders hunched against judgment, the sheriff whose hat never blew off no matter what the canyon threw at him. A crackling loudhailer chewed her name and spit the pieces. Martinez. You have 9 minutes. Councilwoman Martha Pierce didn't bother with pleas or with hope. She stood apart from the others, on a poured concrete pad, like a queen who'd picked the wrong kingdom and meant to fix it by force of tone. 9, she repeated, as if the number were a curse. Ava didn't look down. She didn't look anywhere. An eye might find hers, and ask for comfort she didn't have to give. She looked at steel, at rust, at the bolt that had seized a decade ago and would not admit it. With her left hand she felt along the face of the housing, fingertips learning the map old men had built in the 80 seconds when the dam still had a budget line for maintenance, and not just prayers. There an old gouge, a crescent of bare metal where a wrench had slipped and chewed the paint. She slid her fingers into it until she found a tooth, something designed by a mind that knew this day would come. Wind snapped the strap of her hard hat against her cheek. Lightning flashed high and sideways, the kind that makes a sky seem like it's practicing. No thunder yet, only the long groan of air rearranging itself. Ava. Terry again, closer, reckless. She could picture him with a hand on the fence, knuckles pale, the same stubborn jaw that had made her fall for him at 19 and frustrated her at 35. I'm good, she said, not sure if the words reached the bottom. I have to be. The catwalk lurched under a gust and something clinked at her hip. She checked the backup line, the one she'd clipped after the first went, and saw the carabiner's gate half open as if a careful hand had left it almost closed. A kindness it would finish later. She slammed it with a palm and heard the gate seat against steel. A clean, final click that sounded like what it was chance refusing to be fate. Clock, Pierce said, her voice growing smoother now that the number she held could begin to punish. 8. Ava set her stance and pushed. The wheel scraped a reluctant arc, and the dam answered from its deep throat with a cough of dry air. Somewhere below, a child clapped before a mother's quick hand found small fingers and squeezed them quiet. Again, Ava shifted. Drove from the hips. Let her back do what years of ladders had taught it. The wheel offered another fraction and stopped hard. Don't muscle it. Leverage it. She forced herself to listen past the wind to the memory of a training tape in a dusty break room. The one with the narrator who loved Rule of 3. Do not force a stuck gate. Seek an alternate latch. Confirm secondary points. She felt along the underside of the assembly, blind. Until her gloved knuckle hit a recessed ring. Half clogged with grit. She laughed once, a small bark. You old stubborn thing. She unclipped and reclipped again quick, tidy, and fed her weight to the secondary like you'd hand a heavy bag to a friend you trust more than yourself. A shadow stirred by the tower hatch at her periphery. She didn't turn. The body remembers more than eyes do. Feet planted too square, shoulders kept too narrow, a head held down by a hat brim that wanted to be a disguise. Someone had been here before she climbed, and someone watched to see if the wind would finish what a blade began. Not tonight. She drove the wheel in a tight, brutal circle. It answered. A low, ceremonial tongue of water licked concrete somewhere deep in the gorge, a sound so soft the crowd below first mistook it for wishful thinking. Then came the scrape of old steel sliding against a track that remembered what to do. Thunder finally found its voice, a long roll that didn't belong to the storm so much as to the canyon announcing guests. 7. Pierce said. Because math was the only leverage she had left. Ava wiped a grit tear from the corner of her eye and kept turning. Every fraction hurt, but it was the good hurt, the body's complaint at honest work. Breath in, count 3. Breath out, count 3. Don't think about what comes after. Don't think about whispers in pews or smirks at the gas pumps or the way silence can bruise skin. Just the gate. Just the seesaw give of rust and purpose. Her ribs throbbed where the grate had kissed them. She would feel it tomorrow the way she felt the old childhood falls roller skates, scraped knees. Her mother's palm smelling faintly of bleach as it guided her up. The thought came and went like a bird, alighting, departing. The sky changed temperature like a room when a door opens. The wind turned, picking up the town's loose talk and carrying it away, replacing it with something heavier, wet rock, creosote, hot asphalt, deciding it might forgive. First drop, fat and cold, found the back of her neck. It felt like a clock stopping. The crowd made a sound she'd never heard from them before, a murmur that wasn't gossip and wasn't prayer, but the little noise you make when you realize you might just live. 6. Pierce said reflexively, her voice losing interest in its own threat as raindrops pocked the concrete pad and erased chalk scrawls a kid had made earlier in the day. Y, for rain. Ava planted, and gave the wheel one last hard pull. The gate yielded a stride's worth. Water slid into motion with the patient authority of something older than elections. Down below, some men who hadn't stood next to each other in 10 years took off their hats at the same time and didn't notice. A woman in a quilted vest lifted her face and let the drops tattoo it. Buddy old German shepherd, grayer at the eyes than last summer, barked once at a shadow in the maintenance lot, then leaned his head against the calf of the man holding his leash like reassurance could travel up a leg. The shadow by the hatch withdrew. Ava caught the motion at the edge of sight and memorized it, a certain wary glide that belongs to people who feel watched even when they aren't. She didn't shout. Not yet. There would be a morning for names and proof. Tonight was for the work. She locked the wheel as far open as it would go without stripping teeth and checked her anchor points again. Both held. The catwalk stopped shimmying into her bones and settled into a new note, an almost imperceptible hum that meant the dam had accepted its assignment. The loudhailer popped. Pierce exhaled, tried to turn victory into a committee. Thank you, Miss Martinez. The council appreciates. August took the rest. Terry's voice got there anyway. That's my girl. He shouted. And the words cracked clean in the air. He hadn't called her that in a long time. It shouldn't have warmed her. It did. Don't melt. Hold. Ava stayed braced until the first sheet of rain rattled against the steel and found a rhythm. Until thunder printed itself properly across the ridge. Until she could feel the press of the town ease back a millimeter. A collective spine uncurving. Then she allowed her fingers to ache and her shoulders to drop a fraction. She did not wave. She did not bow. She turned the brake, engaged the lock, and let the dam sing its quiet song. The smell coming off the canyon was childhood and Sunday and the inside of a tin cup filled at a campsite tap. And it moved through Haven Ridge like an apology nobody had thought to make. She knew this wasn't the end of anything. Rain was forgiveness only in church hymns. Tomorrow there would be invoices, and meetings, and a sheriff's report, and men with clean boots telling her the right way to do the thing she had just done. But tonight the sky had chosen to remember how. That would be enough. If this moment hits you, tap like and tell us in the comments. Are you standing with Ava tonight? Morning broke on Haven Ridge with the sound of tires over gravel and the smell of coffee drifting from the diner that had opened earlier than usual, as if the whole town had been woken by the storm's memory. Ava Martinez stood by her trailer window, one palm on the cool glass, watching the ground drink what was left of the night's rain. Puddles mirrored the clouds like a promise they might stay. Her ribs ached from the catwalk's blow and her shoulders burned where steel had fought her. But she was upright, breathing, alive. Buddy, the neighbor's old shepherd, padded up the porch and dropped with a sigh. His fur still damp. She leaned against the counter, poured herself the last inch of yesterday's coffee, cold and bitter, and let it settle on her tongue like truth. Last night's storm had saved the reservoir, at least for now. The gate was open, water flowing, town secured for another season. But storms don't fix people, storms don't erase whispers. She knew that the moment she saw the truck headlights pull up across the lot and Councilwoman Pierce step out, heels sharp on wet gravel, umbrella unopened as if the rain should bow to her. Martha Pierce carried her clipboard like a weapon. She had been a realtor before politics, good at smiling while appraising cracks in foundations, and she used the same skill on people. Quite the spectacle last night, she said when Ava came out onto the porch. Heroic, they're saying. But you understand, of course, it isn't that simple. Ava said nothing, just sipped her coffee and let the silence answer. Pierce stepped closer, voice lowered. There was tampering. The sheriff thinks sabotage. We can't have panic, not with the county delegation arriving next week. People talk when they're scared. They reach for explanations. You've already been a subject of speculation. She let the word hang, sweetened with venom. Ava stared past her at the rising light over the ridge. Speculation doesn't open floodgates. Hands do. Pierce smiled thin as wire. We'll need a report. And you'll need to be careful where you place your trust. Haven Ridge is a small town. Small towns don't forget. She clicked her heels back to the truck, umbrella still closed, and drove off. Ava breathed once, let her jaw unclench. The ground was already drying, the dust eager to reclaim its place. She thought of the shadow at the hatch last night. The way it had slipped away when the first sheets of rain fell. She thought of the clean cut in her safety line. Someone had wanted her gone. Not a rumor. Not a whisper, an act. She turned back inside, set the empty mug down, and pressed her fingers against the old wedding photograph still pinned crooked on the fridge. She and Terry, 20-something, laughing under a 4th of July sky, holding hands sticky with melted ice cream. She traced the edge, then let it fall. The knock at the door came soft. Terry, holding a paper sack that smelled of bacon and biscuits, stood there with his hair still damp from the storm. Brought breakfast, he said, like it was an apology. You didn't have to, she answered, but her voice didn't push him away. He stepped inside, set the bag on the counter, and glanced at her ribs. You hurting? I've been worse. She opened the bag, tore off a corner of biscuit. Butter, warm and familiar. They ate in silence for a while, Buddy at their feet, tail sweeping the linoleum. Finally, Terry said, "What really happened up there?" Ava's fork froze midway. The gate was stuck. Not that. The line. I saw it snap. Ava. That wasn't age. Somebody cut it. She met his eyes and saw no judgment, only fear. I know, she said. He waited, and in the silence the old weight pressed against her the secret she had carried since birth. The one Cassie had let slip over drinks, the one that had made the church pews buzz and the gas station chuckle. But she wasn't ready. Not yet. She reached for safer ground. Pierce came by this morning. She wants it quiet. Sheriff will write it up as equipment failure if she has her way. Terry muttered a curse, ran a hand through his hair. This town would rather lie to itself than face a truth. Always has. His voice softened. You shouldn't have been up there alone. Who else was going to do it? She said. He didn't answer. And the silence was heavier than words. Later, Ava walked the short stretch to the diner, shoulders squared, ribs sore but steady. Inside, the smell of eggs and hash browns, the hiss of a griddle, the clink of cups. Men in ball caps glanced up, offered nods they wouldn't have given a week ago. Old Mrs. Ramirez behind the counter poured her coffee without asking and said, "On the house, honey. Brave work last night." Ava managed a smile. Not all whispers cut. At the corner booth sat Cassie Oakes, childhood friend, head bent over a notebook. She looked up, eyes wide with something between guilt and relief. "Ava," she said softly. "Can we talk?" Ava slid into the booth, the vinyl sighing under her weight. Cassie's hands fidgeted with the edge of the paper. "I never meant for it to spread. I swear. I told my sister because I was scared for you, and she told her husband, and then." Her voice trailed. The whole town knew. Ava stirred her coffee, watching the swirl. "Secrets don't stay secret here. You should have known that." "I know. I'm sorry. I thought if people understood. They don't want to understand. They want to label. To whisper." Cassie's eyes shone. "Last night proved them wrong. You stood up there when no one else would. Maybe that's what it'll take. Maybe they'll see now." Ava almost laughed, but it caught in her throat. Maybe. Or maybe they'll just find another reason. The bell over the diner door jingled and Pierce's nephew stepped in, ball cap low, eyes darting. He ordered coffee to go, avoided Ava's gaze. Buddy, tied outside, growled low, teeth flashing just enough for Ava to notice through the window. She felt her chest tighten. That was the shadow. She knew it. Cassie followed her stare. "You think he?" "I don't think. I know." Ava stood, dropped a few bills on the table, and walked out into the morning light. She crouched to scratch Buddy's ears, whispering, "Good boy." as the dog's hackles stayed high. Her ribs hurt, her hands trembled, but her mind was steady. The storm had opened more than the floodgate. It had opened a reckoning. As she walked back toward the trailer, boots splashing through the last of the puddles, she felt the eyes of the town on her again, not all cruel, some cautious, some even respectful. But she knew the battle wasn't over. The real fight was just beginning, and it wasn't with steel or water. It was with silence. With the kind of fear that lived in pews and council chambers and backyards. Ava pulled her jacket tighter and set her jaw. The rain had changed the land. Now it was her turn to change the story. Why, the third day after the storm the puddles had already dried, leaving cracked outlines like maps across Haven Ridge's streets. And people began to speak of the rain in past tense, as though it had been a rumor instead of a deliverance. At the diner, men leaned on the counter, talking about how the storm had been luck, timing, God's will, anything but the grit of Ava Martinez's hands on the wheel. At the grocery store, whispers floated near the canned goods aisle, softer than before but still sharp enough for her to feel as she passed. She kept her head high, filling her basket with eggs, tortillas, and coffee, pretending not to notice. Outside, Terry was waiting in his truck. He rolled down the window, arm resting on the frame. "Need a ride back?" he asked. She shook her head. "I'll walk." His eyes followed her down the sidewalk, and she knew he wanted to say more but didn't. Haven Ridge had always been a town that wore its grudges openly. That week, though, something else clung in the air. Unease. The sheriff stopped by her trailer on Wednesday, hat in hand, shifting on his boots. "We pulled the footage from the dam," he said. "There's a blind spot where the hatch sits. Couldn't get a clear face. But Buddy barking at Pierce's nephew that morning, that doesn't look good for him." Ava nodded, already knowing. "Are you charging him?" The sheriff hesitated. "Not yet. Martha Pierce is leaning hard. Says no evidence, just conjecture. You know how this town is." Ava folded her arms, ribs still tender. "This town nearly watched me die because someone cut a line. That's more than conjecture." He tipped his hat. Eyes heavy. "Be careful, Ava. Some folks would rather let things rot quiet than drag them into light." When he left, she sat on the porch with Buddy sprawled beside her. The sky had cleared to a hard blue, the kind that promised no rain for weeks. She scratched behind the dog's ear and whispered, "They want quiet. But quiet's what nearly killed me." That night she dreamed of the catwalk, of steel groaning, of her body dangling over darkness. She woke with her shirt damp, unsure if it was sweat or memory. The next morning, Haven Ridge's church bell tolled for a service of thanksgiving. People gathered in pressed shirts and Sunday dresses, thanking heaven for the rain. Ava sat in the back pew, unseen by most, listening as Pastor Lowell said, "We were tested, and the righteous were spared." Rain is God's answer, but it comes only when we walk in purity. The congregation murmured, "Amen." Ava felt heat crawl up her throat. The message was not subtle. She left before the final hymn, walking out into the sunlight where Cassie hurried after her. "He means well," Cassie said weakly. "He means control," Ava answered. "And Pierce is feeding him the lines." Cassie bit her lip. "The nephew he was boasting at the bar last week. Said he knew how to make sure you wouldn't be the hero again." I didn't want to believe it. Ava stopped on the sidewalk. "And you didn't tell me." Cassie's eyes dropped. "I was afraid. You know what happens when people talk." Ava's laugh was short and sharp. "They already talk." She walked away, boots hitting the pavement harder than she meant, the town square around her buzzing with conversations that dimmed as she passed. That evening, she found Terry waiting at the dam, leaning against the fence as the water rushed below. "I remember when we used to come here just to sit," he said as she approached. "Back when the reservoir was full and kids swam by the rocks." Ava leaned beside him, arms folded. "Feels like a different life." He studied her. "You can't take them all on by yourself. Pierce. The church. The whispers. You'll break." She looked at him, eyes steady. "I broke a long time ago, Terry. Now I'm just making sure I don't stay broken." He reached for her hand, tentative. She let him take it for a moment before pulling away gently. "If you want to help me, don't tell me to stay quiet." A truck rumbled past on the ridge road, headlights flashing, and she thought she saw the nephew's profile in the driver's seat. A smirk turned toward the dam. Buddy growled low beside her, hackles high. Ava narrowed her eyes. He's not finished. Over the next days, the small threats grew. A tire slashed on her truck. A dead crow left on her porch. Notes shoved under the trailer door with words scrawled in thick marker. "Leave or be left." Ava burned the notes in a coffee can out back, watching the paper curl and blacken. Silence wouldn't protect her, she realized. It never had. Friday night she went to the town council meeting. The room smelled of wood polish and old paper, the American flag drooping in the corner. Pierce sat at the head of the table, hair sprayed into armor, lips painted sharp. "Miss Martinez," she said, smiling like a blade. "What brings you here?" Ava stepped forward, voice clear. "My safety line was cut. Your nephew was there. The town deserves to know." A murmur rippled through the room. Pierce's smile tightened. "Those are accusations, not facts. We have no evidence." Ava met her eyes. "We have Buddy's teeth marks, we have a badge dropped, and we have a town that saw me nearly fall. That's evidence enough for anyone not trying to bury it." An older man at the back cleared his throat. "She's right, Martha. We all saw her hanging there. Somebody tried to kill her." The room shifted, weight tilting. Pierce's voice rose, brittle. "This town needs unity, not suspicion. If we start blaming our own, we'll never recover." Ava leaned on the table, knuckles white. "Unity without truth isn't unity. It's a lie with better lighting." The silence that followed was long and heavy. Some eyes avoided hers. Some met them with a flicker of respect. Pierce banged the gavel and adjourned the meeting, but Ava knew something had cracked. Outside, Terry caught up to her. "You just painted a target bigger than the dam." She exhaled, watching the stars blink awake over the desert. "Then let them aim." "I'm done hiding." Buddy pressed against her leg, steady and solid. She set her hand on his head, feeling the steady thrum of life beneath fur. Haven Ridge had drawn its lines. She was on one side, Pierce and her shadows on the other. The fight was no longer about water. It was about truth, and whether this town had the courage to face it. Ava squared her shoulders and started down Main Street. Every step an answer to the whispers that trailed behind her. The night the second storm rolled over Haven Ridge, Ava Martinez felt the air change before the clouds even showed their faces. The heat had broken into a restless wind, carrying grit across the trailer's windows and rattling the tin awning until it whined like an old violin. Buddy paced near the door, ears flat, nose to the crack, as if he could smell something beyond weather. Ava tightened her jacket, looked at the clock, and knew Pierce's nephew would not let her walk away from the council meeting unpunished. She had made herself a target. Now the crosshairs were steady. When the sheriff's call came just after 9, his voice was tight. "Gate sensors at Dry Mesa are showing fluctuation. Could be nothing. But given, you know." Ava was already lacing her boots. "I'll check it. Take someone with you." She glanced at Buddy and answered, "I will." The road to the dam was slick with dust swept into ridges, headlights cutting through powder that hung like smoke. Terry's truck appeared in her mirror, keeping a careful distance, following without asking permission. She felt the tug of his presence. Half comfort, half weight. By the time they reached the dam, clouds had shouldered up against the ridge, black and swollen, lightning bruising their bellies. The catwalk gleamed wet, though no rain had fallen yet. Only mist wrung from the air. Ava clipped her harness with deliberate care, double-checking every gate and buckle. She had learned her lesson. Terry called up from the concrete pad, his voice rising against the wind. "I'm not letting you do this alone again." "Stay clear," she shouted back. "If something goes wrong, you'll just get pulled in with me." Buddy barked once, sharp, like he agreed. She moved onto the catwalk, the steel vibrating under each step. Her flashlight beam caught the wheel assembly ahead, and she froze. The lock bar was gone. The gate was trembling, opening on its own, water seeping through in sputters and spits. Someone had forced it loose. And then she saw him, standing at the hatch with a crowbar in his hands, cap low, jacket collar up. Pierce's nephew. His eyes glittered in the beam, mean and bright. "Should have let the first line do the job," he called. "Would have saved us all the trouble." Ava's throat tightened, but her voice was steady. "You're tampering with a dam in a storm. That's not just reckless. That's a death sentence for this town." He smirked. "Town already chose its death. You don't belong here. Never did. Folks like you just stir the dirt." Buddy's growl carried across the gorge. Lightning cracked, closer this time, showing the man's stance, the way his knuckles whitened on the crowbar. He stepped onto the catwalk. The steel trembled under two bodies, the space between them narrowing with each step. Ava shifted her weight, braced near the wheel. "If you open it wrong, the surge will wipe half the valley. You'll drown the people you claim to protect." His laugh was short, brittle. "They'll blame you, not me. That's the beauty of it. Hero falls twice, and folks will just say it was fate." He lunged, crowbar swinging. Ava ducked. the bar clanging against the railing, sparks bursting like fireflies. She shoved forward, shoulders slamming his chest, both of them grappling against slick steel. Her ribs screamed, but adrenaline drowned pain. The crowbar clattered, skittered toward the edge. Terry's voice thundered from below. Ava. She locked eyes with the man, inches away, his breath sour, his fury naked. I'm not falling, she hissed. He shoved harder, trying to pry her grip from the rail. But Buddy, straining against his leash, barked with a fury that split the night. The sound startled him just enough. Ava drove her knee forward, unbalancing him. He staggered. One boot slipping off the catwalk's edge, hands flailing. She caught the front of his jacket on instinct, heart hammering. For a moment she could have let go and ended it. But she held. Look at me, she said through her teeth. If I can carry what I carry every day and not let it poison me, you can face the truth of what you just did. You tried to kill me, and you nearly killed this town. His eyes widened, not with remorse but fear. He clawed back onto the grate, panting, before wrenching away and bolting toward the hatch. Ava staggered after him, but the wheel shuddered violently under her hand. The gate was slipping, water roaring louder, the storm feeding its frenzy. She had a choice. Chase him, or save the dam. She chose the dam. Planting both feet, she threw her weight into the wheel, muscles shrieking, steel biting. Lightning split overhead, thunder rolling a second later, as if the storm itself was counting her seconds. Come on, she growled, every word a shove. The wheel inched, the gate grinding into place, choking the surge. Below, the townspeople who had gathered again drawn by the alarm watched, silent, faces lifted in the jagged light. She locked the latch with the last of her strength, the bar clicking home with a sound that rang truer than any sermon. Rain finally fell, hard and sudden. A curtain slamming down. The crowd erupted, but Ava barely heard them. Her chest heaved, her hands bled raw through the gloves, and she knew she had forced order out of chaos one more time. Terry ran up the stairs, soaked, grabbing her arm before she collapsed. You're bleeding. Better than drowning, she gasped, leaning on him for balance. Buddy barked again, ears pinned, facing the road. Ava followed his gaze and saw the nephew's truck tearing off into the night, taillights streaking red through rain. She knew this wasn't over. Haven Ridge had seen her stand twice now, and whispers were no longer enough for Pierce and her circle. They would sharpen their knives, try again in some other way. But she also knew something had shifted in the crowd below. People who once turned their eyes away were clapping, shouting her name. Old men tipped their hats, women pressed hands to their hearts. She had not erased their prejudice, but she had forced them to see her strength. Terry squeezed her shoulder. You've got the whole town behind you now. She shook her head. Not the whole town. Not yet. The rain pounded, washing grit from the dam, carrying it downriver. Ava stood tall, bruised and soaked, watching water thunder into the gorge. The fight had broken open. It was no longer about survival alone. It was about justice, and she would not walk away from it. By morning the rain had settled into memory, leaving Haven Ridge damp but alive. The air rinsed clean, the dust tamped down for the first time in years. Yet beneath that freshness there lingered the taste of fear, because what happened at the dam was no accident, and word was already running faster than the runoff filling the reservoir. Ava Martinez sat on the edge of her trailer's porch, Buddy leaning heavy against her leg, his coat still damp from the night. Her hands were bandaged, skin raw from the wheel, ribs aching where the crowbar had grazed her. But she was steady. She knew silence would only invite more danger. She had to bring what was in the shadows into the light. The sheriff came by at mid-morning, hat low, notebook tucked under his arm. His boots scuffed the gravel as he said, crowds talking. Some say they saw Pierce's nephew near the hatch before it all went wrong. Ava's eyes were sharp. They didn't just see him. He was there. He attacked me. If I hadn't locked that gate, the surge would have torn through half the valley. The sheriff nodded slowly, weary eyes flicking toward the road. I believe you, Ava. But Pierce has been leaning on every ear she can find. She'll say you're imagining, exaggerating. We need something solid. Buddy growled low, then nudged something with his nose. A torn strip of denim snagged on the fence, frayed and mud-streaked. Ava picked it up, heart hammering. He ripped his jacket when he slipped. This is proof. Later that day Terry drove her into town, his truck rattling over patched roads. The plaza was alive with talk, folks clustering outside the post office, at the diner, on the steps of City Hall. When Ava stepped down, conversations dipped, eyes turned. Some nods carried respect, others carried suspicion. She held the denim in one hand, lifted it high. Last night someone tried to flood this town. Pierce's nephew cut my line, broke the lock, nearly killed me, and all of you along with me. A hush rolled across the crowd. From the front row, Martha Pierce stepped forward, lips pressed thin but smiling with a politician's poise. Miss Martinez, that's a serious claim. You have no right to stir panic. This town is fragile, and your accusations. Ava's voice cut sharp through the square. This is an accusation, this is evidence. She held out the denim, dirty and torn, the sheriff stepping beside her with notebook ready. This was caught on the damn fence. We'll match it to his jacket. And Buddy here saw him plain. Buddy barked once, the sound echoing against storefronts. The crowd murmured, shifting, eyes narrowing toward Pierce. An old rancher spat on the ground. We all know whose boy's been drinking at the bar, running his mouth about teaching the freak a lesson. You think we don't hear? Pierce's mask cracked, anger flashing. This is slander. She snapped. My family has served this town for generations. And what has she done but bring shame and division? Ava felt her chest tighten but her voice steadied. I brought water. Twice. And all I asked was the truth. This isn't about shame. This is about who sabotaged a dam in the middle of a storm and put us all in danger. The sheriff raised a hand. We'll investigate proper. But let it be clear. Endangering this town is a crime. And we have enough now to bring him in. The nephew was gone by the time deputies reached his house, the truck missing. Tires tracked out toward the highway. But Haven Ridge had already seen enough. For the first time since Whispers began, Ava felt the weight shift. At the diner that afternoon, Mrs. Ramirez poured her coffee and set down a slice of pecan pie on the counter. On me, she said. Not for last night. For standing up when the rest of us stayed quiet too long. Ava tasted the pie, sweet and rich, and felt something break loose in her chest, something heavier than steel. Across the counter, Terry sat with his hands around a chipped mug. You've turned the tide, he said softly. Pierce can't talk her way out of this. Ava shook her head. She'll try. People like her always do. But truth has teeth. And once it bites, it doesn't let go. That evening the town held a gathering at the community hall. Folding chairs lined the floor, old flags hanging on paneled walls, the smell of potluck dishes carried in by neighbors. For the first time in years, eyes met hers without turning away. An elder stood, hat in hand. Ava. We owe you an apology. We let talk make us cruel. We let lies steer us. But you saved us. Twice now. That counts more than gossip. A murmur of agreement filled the hall. Low but real. Pierce sat stiff in the corner, face pale, hands knotted on her lap. Ava rose slowly, pain in her ribs making her careful. I didn't do this for thanks, she said. I did it because it had to be done. And I'll keep doing it. But understand this. Secrets can rot a town worse than drought. If we keep letting fear run our decisions, we'll lose more than water. We'll lose ourselves. The room fell quiet, the kind of silence that carries respect. Terry stepped beside her, his hand brushing hers. Not claiming, not demanding, just steady. Cassie, from the back, called out. She's right. We all knew more than we admitted. It's time we stop hiding. Eyes turned, voices joined small at first, then stronger. Pierce's nephew was still out there, but his shield was gone. And with every word spoken in that hall, the fortress of silence cracked wider. As Ava stepped down, Buddy pressed against her side, tail thumping. She felt the shift in the room, the slow turning of hearts. The fight was not finished, but for the first time she wasn't standing alone. Haven Ridge had begun to see her not as the subject of whispers but as the measure of their survival. And Ava, bruised and bandaged, lifted her chin to meet their gaze, knowing that justice was no longer a dream whispered in private. It was coming, with the weight of storm clouds and the steadiness of truth. By morning, the rain had settled into memory, leaving Haven Ridge damp but alive. The air rinsed clean, the dust tamped down for the first time in years. Yet beneath that freshness there lingered the taste of fear, because what happened at the dam was no accident, and word was already running faster than the runoff filling the reservoir. Ava Martinez sat on the edge of her trailer's porch, Buddy leaning heavy against her leg, his coat still damp from the night. Her hands were bandaged, skin raw from the wheel, ribs aching where the crowbar had grazed her, but she was steady. She knew silence would only invite more danger. She had to bring what was in the shadows into the light. The sheriff came by at mid-morning, hat low, notebook tucked under his arm. His boots scuffed the gravel as he said, "Crowds talking. Some say they saw Pierce's nephew near the hatch before it all went wrong. Ava's eyes were sharp. They didn't just see him. He was there. He attacked me. If I hadn't locked that gate, the surge would have torn through half the valley. The sheriff nodded slowly, weary eyes flicking toward the road. I believe you, Ava. But Pierce has been leaning on every ear she can find. She'll say you're imagining, exaggerating. We need something solid. Buddy growled low, then nudged something with his nose, a torn strip of denim snagged on the fence, frayed and mud-streaked. Ava picked it up, heart hammering. He ripped his jacket when he slipped. This is proof. Later that day Terry drove her into town, his truck rattling over patched roads. The plaza was alive with talk, folks clustering outside the post office, at the diner, on the steps of City Hall. When Ava stepped down, conversations dipped, eyes turned. Some nods carried respect, others carried suspicion. She held the denim in one hand, lifted it high. Last night, someone tried to flood this town. Pierce's nephew cut my line, broke the lock, nearly killed me and all of you along with me. A hush rolled across the crowd. From the front row, Martha Pierce stepped forward, lips pressed thin, but smiling with a politician's poise. Miss Martinez, that's a serious claim. You have no right to stir panic. This town is fragile, and your accusations. Ava's voice cut sharp through the square. This isn't accusation. This is evidence. She held out the denim, dirty and torn. The sheriff stepping beside her with notebook ready. This was caught on the damn fence. We'll match it to his jacket, and Buddy here saw him plain. Buddy barked once, the sound echoing against storefronts. The crowd murmured, shifting, eyes narrowing toward Pierce. An old rancher spat on the ground. We all know whose boy's been drinking at the bar, running his mouth about teaching the freak a lesson. You think we don't hear? Pierce's mask cracked, anger flashing. This is slander. She snapped. My family has served this town for generations. And what has she done but bring shame and division? Ava felt her chest tighten but her voice steadied. I brought water. Twice. And all I asked was the truth. This isn't about shame. This is about who sabotaged a dam in the middle of a storm and put us all in danger. The sheriff raised a hand. We'll investigate proper. But let it be clear. Endangering this town is a crime. And we have enough now to bring him in. The nephew was gone by the time deputies reached his house, the truck missing, tires tracked out toward the highway. But Haven Ridge had already seen enough. For the first time since Whispers began, Ava felt the weight shift. At the diner that afternoon, Mrs. Ramirez poured her coffee and set down a slice of pecan pie on the counter. On me, she said. Not for last night. For standing up when the rest of us stayed quiet too long. Ava tasted the pie, sweet and rich, and felt something break loose in her chest, something heavier than steel. Across the counter, Terry sat with his hands around a chipped mug. You've turned the tide, he said softly. Pierce can't talk her way out of this. Ava shook her head. She'll try. People like her always do. But truth has teeth. And once it bites, it doesn't let go. That evening the town held a gathering at the community hall. Folding chairs lined the floor, old flags hanging on paneled walls. The smell of potluck dishes carried in by neighbors. For the first time in years, eyes met hers without turning away. An elder stood, hat in hand. Ava, we owe you an apology. We let talk make us cruel. We let lies steer us. But you saved us, twice now. That counts more than gossip. A murmur of agreement filled the hall, low but real. Pierce sat stiff in the corner, face pale, hands knotted on her lap. Ava rose slowly, pain in her ribs making her careful. I didn't do this for thanks, she said. I did it because it had to be done. And I'll keep doing it. But understand this. Secrets can rot a town worse than drought. If we keep letting fear run our decisions, we'll lose more than water. We'll lose ourselves. The room fell quiet, the kind of silence that carries respect. Terry stepped beside her, his hand brushing hers. Not claiming, not demanding, just steady. Cassie, from the back, called out, she's right. We all knew more than we admitted. It's time we stop hiding. Eyes turned, voices joined small at first, then stronger. Pierce's nephew was still out there, but his shield was gone. And with every word spoken in that hall, the fortress of silence cracked wider. As Ava stepped down, Buddy pressed against her side, tail thumping. She felt the shift in the room, the slow turning of hearts. The fight was not finished, but for the first time she wasn't standing alone. Haven Ridge had begun to see her not as the subject of whispers but as the measure of their survival. And Ava, bruised and bandaged, lifted her chin to meet their gaze. knowing that justice was no longer a dream whispered in private. It was coming, with the weight of storm clouds and the steadiness of truth.